Hello YouTube, so today a little bit of a different video as requested by one of my patrons, Mr. Goodfella146. Today we are talking about the changing Aldmeri perspective on men throughout the ages. With our main focus being the perspectives of the 2nd and the 4th era, since we basically know the most about these periods, and we will be talking a bit about how it changed and what it changed. And in extension, why the High Elves in the current age are coming across as such evil beings to us Imperial supporters, but that they actually make kinda sense. So with that said, let's kick right off with the video. So, as I said, in this day and age, almost everybody universally hates the Thalmor and in extension the High Elves. Always being arrogant, seeing themselves as superior to humans, wanting to kill a lot of humans, and they took our Talos. But this hasn't always been the case, sort of. The High Elves and the humans have a complicated relationship. Let's say that 9 out of the 10 times in history they have been at odds with each other in terms of perspectives and opinions. However, something we fail to realize is that the Somerset Isles, and in extension the races of Mer, and specifically the High Elves, were not always as bloodthirsty as Skyrim would lead you to believe. So when and how and what made them change? This all pretty much started in the 2nd era, late 1st era. During the ending of the 1st era, the Riemann Empire ruled over all of Tamriel, except for Morrowind and some people say the Somerset Isles. Some sources claim that the Somerset Isles were actually part of the Empire, however we have no historical proof as to how it got admitted. Apparently it got admitted through diplomacy, and this actually leads me to believe that it was basically an autonomous province, as there's no way the Riemann Empire could have conquered the Isles on its own. So it would mean that the Riemann Empire would not have a direct rule over the Somersets, but this is largely speculation, because we have conflicting sources. I mean, on one hand it would also make sense for the Somersets to be admitted into the Empire as an autonomous province by diplomacy, as this could, well, have some huge economic benefits. Certainly if they can retain their autonomy. Being an island off the coast of Tamriel, the population of the Somerset Isles had always had, well, it held itself at an arm's length distance when it came to the things happening on Tamriel. Tamriel was always very much in conflict. And usually the High Elves and the Somerset Isles would stay out of all this conflict, unless they themselves were threatened, like with the Marmor or the Sloats attacking them, or anyone else attacking them. Most of the time they would have an isolationist government, just being happy on their island while the rest of Tamriel was in turmoil. They saw themselves as superior to the humans and their silly wars, as they literally say in one of their pamphlets at the time, "Orcs, Dark Elves and men, and most of all men, are best at war. They have drenched the mainland of Tamriel in the rivers of blood. As long as their follies were confined to murdering one another, what they did in and around the so-called Imperial city was beneath the notice of the Aldmeri of Somerset." And, well, as an Imperial supporter, it may pain to say this, but they were right. By having this general attitude to the other races, basically saying, hey, we don't hate you, but your petty wars and limited perspectives are beneath us, and we won't interfere as long as you, well, just don't point your sticks at us. They basically thrived for many years, and they have always been the most advanced civilization in terms of magic. This is of course largely the effect of them having innate affinity with magic, but the fact that they had until that point been the most peaceful and successful society on Tamriel must have helped. However, this continued only until the interregnum between the Riemann and Septim empires. As I said before, at first they were like, hey, do what you want on Tamriel, as long as you don't bother us with it. This led them to avoid much of the interregnum's chaos. However, something happened that would change their views on the isolationism. The plane melt. In short, what happened is that one of the petty emperors during the interregnum, Varon Aquilarius, wanted to establish a dynasty that would bring peace to all of Tamriel. He planned to do this by pleading to Akatus to make him Dragonborn. That way he would be seen as a legitimate ruler. The thing is that this plan completely backfired. He was betrayed during this ritual by his mage Mannimarco, who then used the opportunity to tear the veil between Nirn and Oblivion. From that moment on, the empire would be ruled by the Empress Regent, Clivia Tharn, who was basically a puppet of Mannimarco, who was in turn planning to basically let the world be destroyed by Molag Bal. That's, in short, the hugely oversimplified story of Elder Scrolls Online. There's much more to it, but it's a little bit oversimplified and it's all you need to know for this video. This moment, the High Elves of Somerset finally stopped their isolationist policies, not because the humans bothered them, but because the human empire was essentially causing for the destruction of the entire world, a world they were also part of. So then, Queen Irene of the Somerset Isles made the controversial choice to create an Aldmeri dominion, an alliance between the Bosmer, Khajiit and Altmer that would have the objective to rule Tamriel, to keep it safe. They did this because, according to the Altmer, letting the world be ruled by men would be too much of a danger in the world, because the desire for power in men would inevitably lead to them tampering with powers and dangers they did not understand or would be able to control, like the plane melt. So the High Elves saw it as their burden to bring order back to Tamriel and then rule with the Bosmer cousins and their Khajiit allies, and in that way guide Tamriel with wisdom that only the Mer races possessed, so Tamriel would be safeguarded against the failures of men, and it would be preserved for future generations. If I look at it from their perspective, this actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, they did not hate the humans, they just found them to be unfit in their judgment and wisdom to rule Tamriel. Now, this first Aldmeri dominion would ultimately fail to do this, and eventually they would fall apart. However, this would remain to be their motivations in their interactions with Tamriel from now on. The founding of the second Aldmeri dominion was also partly motivated with the urge to protect Tamriel from itself. Now, let's skip ahead a couple hundred years. The second Aldmeri dominion had been founded and it brought stability to the Somerset Isles and Valenwood, and with its treaty that it had with Elsewhere, also to Elsewhere. This stability made the southeastern part of Tamriel the most stable region of all of Tamriel during this time. More stable than it had been for centuries by this point, and all those regions actually prospered. The leading government of this political union was the Thalmor. Not the 4th era Thalmor, no, the 2nd era Thalmor. The 2nd era Thalmor were basically the entire government. The word Thalmor was basically synonymous with the word government, as the Thalmor of this age consisted out of the Bosmer chiefs and Altmeri officials. Under this government, which was almost universally accepted by the people it governed, because it was all those people were represented in the government, the Aldmeri dominion basically prospered in peace. However, on Tamriel no peace is made to last, as, well, in the north a new threat was forming, the Empire of Tiber Septim, and it had just conquered Hammerfell and was busy with the war planning to conquer all of Tamriel. Minor skirmishes with the Empire already occurred at this time, but as far as we know the Empire did not attempt a full-on invasion of the Somerset Isles or Valenwood, as the Empire knew that a unified Mer were basically too strong to conquer at this point. It is said that during this time the Empire had even sent diplomats to the Dominion to make peace with them and to ultimately coexist as two empires on Tamriel. However, this wasn't not to be, as the Empire following its war with Morrowind obtained the Numidium, the Brass God, an ancient Dwemer robot with near unlimited power. When Tiber Septim had managed to power up this weapon, well, he decided to stop the peace negotiations and attack the Dominion using the Numidium, essentially a weapon of mass destruction. He used the Numidium to obliterate Altmeri armies, causing mass destruction and killing a lot of Altmer in the process. The use of the Numidium actually caused a dragon break. This made it so that the length of the siege of the Somerset Isles is actually not known. Some say it took years, while others say that, well, the island surrendered within an hour. And like that, a terrible tragedy fell over the Aldmeri people. Mass genocide had taken place in what some well say is just a span of an hour. So many deaths and sorrow led the Altmeri government to capitulate, well, some say within an hour. And the Dominion officially ceased to exist, and like that, all of Tamriel was unified in blood by Tiber Septim. For almost 450 years, the Altmer people would be governed by the Imperial Septim dynasty. The Altmeri royalty would be appeased with Imperial gold, and the Somerset Isles would remain part of the Empire, and would later be forced to take their conqueror, and the one responsible for genocide, up in their pantheon. The god Talos, Tiber Septim, was officially part of the gods of the Empire. The 8 divines became 9, and this angered a lot of Altmer. But there wasn't much they could do, with their kings and queens in the grip of Imperial gold, and they were subject to the Empire. It was in this period of time when a radical faction, that named itself after the Altmeri governments of old, would form itself. This group that had called themselves the Thalmor would never forget the mass genocide that was basically done by the hands of Tiber Septim. They would be a political party that was often ignored and ridiculed in this new Aldmeri society, worsening their hate for men and the Empire, and Tiber Septim, now worshipped as Talos. A lot of the older Altmer remembered Tiber Septim and shared a lot of their sentiments. However, they would not support the Thalmor on a grand scale yet, because, well, probably because they did not like conflict in their land. Rather a peaceful occupation than another war. Many of the younger Aldmer also did not support them, as, well, they had never even lived under any other rule than Imperial rule, and, well, there was nothing else that they knew. However, this all changed when the Septim line ended, and the Oblivion Crisis subsequently ended. The Oblivion Crisis wreaked havoc upon the Somerset Isles. According to some sources, almost the entire island had been overrun by the Daedra, and the only safe places were certain citadels, like there was Crystal Tower, where the Aldmeri armies and the Imperial Legion still held their ground. And then, the Daedra suddenly disappeared, because of the sacrifice of Martin Septim at the end of the game Oblivion. The news, however, of this sacrifice and its effect that it had would not reach the Somerset Isles in time, for in the Somerset Isles the Thalmor claimed that they were the ones responsible for ending the crisis, quickly taking the opportunity to get more influence. The following years the Thalmor grew in popularity, and if you wish to see that subject explained, please look at my video on the Thalmor. Once the Thalmor got into popular power, they basically started putting their thoughts of elven supremacy and hate for the humans and the Empire into practice by banning all humans from the Somerset Isles and declaring independence from the Empire. They then, over the following years, would recreate the Aldmeri Dominion with the ultimate goal of wresting political dominance of Tamriel from the hands of the men that had wronged them and that had enacted genocide upon their people many years ago. An event many elves still remember because of their long lifespans, and, well, some elves actually still saw it happen before their very eyes. Some of those are still alive. It is therefore not at all strange that the Thalmor have such a lot of popular support back home at this point, because a lot of elves share their anti-imperial sentiment. So, the purpose of this story was to show that high elves are not really innately evil and are not necessarily hateful of humans. It's simply that, well, something that the humans themselves caused with the genocide of the Altmer people. What Tiber Septim started in the Second Era is still remembered by a lot of elves, because elves live a lot longer than humans, and thus I can kind of understand why the high elves would support the Thalmor, even though some of them might be pacifists. But yeah, if you remember such a mass genocide, I mean, I would also be angry. Now, as someone who usually plays as an Imperial in Elder Scrolls games, I would never support the Thalmor, not even if you get the choice in the game. But I can see why some people, for example people that play a lot of the times as High Elves, why they would support the Thalmor, and I respect their decision, certainly after learning this entire story. Even if it makes us sworn enemies. Just kidding. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't just dislike it because I pseudo-defend the Thalmor. I mean, not all of them are bad, but we did some pretty nasty things too, Imperials. Even though we're definitely better. Sorry. If you liked it, like the video, subscribe. If you want to see more videos like this one, so lore videos, click the bell icon next to the subscription button so you can see when my videos come online. Also, if you want to support me in a more personal way, there's my Patreon. You get your name at the end of every video and some cool Patreon content. And also, if you want personal contact with me, there is my Discord and Instagram in the description. On my Instagram, I'm currently doing 50 days of lore, which means every day I'm posting an image with some lore information. So if you want more lore than just this video, check my Instagram out. With that said, I will see you all in the next lore video. Bye bye.